karaoke bars. Jane just finished her PhD, and fantastic to see her here. And also my other PhD student from Thailand, Dr. Fakiri. I just want to say that I've been involved with Thai students for many years. And today's talk is absolutely impossible to take care of, meeting the challenges of 21st century TESOL. It's a big and bold topic, and I proposed it just thinking, what are some of the issues that I can help you with here at Thai TESOL? And my image was to really get you going and thinking about how you can get into this big, bold topic of the 21st century. But what I discovered was, and what I soon realized, we live in a complex and fast-paced world, but I know you know that. And so I started having a lot of doubts in finishing my topic on this huge 21st century challenges. And indeed, you know lots and lots of things that I was in fact going to say. And what I was going to do was to bring you to new heights and talk about, for example, globalization. So this is one of the big challenges for our age. Some of the key speakers in this area are coming, some of the key writers in this area. You know, Claire Cranch, she recently gave a talk on globalization. And what's happening is that it's influencing many facets of our lives, our cultures, our languages. And in fact, even phrases like culture shock are now being questioned. People are saying culture shock no longer exists because of that cultural familiarity through, for example, globalization. And also, you know too that Thailand, as many other countries, is set to become a knowledge economy, which is a big, bold challenge for the 21st century, whose fortunes are increasingly tied to a global economy. And of course, as we've heard from many speakers, the ASEAN membership is coming up later this year. So there's a lot of rapid change. There's 7 billion of us on this planet. And I was also going to talk about technology and media, one of the areas that's close to my heart, but you know that media are influential, pervasive, converging, and you know that our students are using technologies more and more and more. But really what it's doing is destabilizing. Technology is destabilizing what a classroom is. So at this conference I've heard people say, my classroom, and I almost raised my hand several times and said, what is your classroom? How can you tell if it's so distinct, the boundaries? The boundaries are no longer distinct to what a classroom is. And it turns out the next target, multinationals are now going to target health. If you follow Apple Computer and their products, a lot of them are doing a lot of health apps. But the next wave is going to be multinationals are going to start targeting education. If you really think about the major corporations that really haven't touched education, it's still been a lot of us educators have been touched. For the next 3 to 5 years, education will become a big concern of the multinationals. And you know too that what the convergence is that there's going to be quote-unquote an unholy alliance between Harvard University and Disney Corporation. You can imagine English taught by Tinkerbell on a computer from a Harvard professor. This unholy alliance is coming. And you know too that a Thai person speaking English will likely speak English with someone who's also learned English, and also quote-unquote a non-native speaker. But that whole idea of a native speaker is now very contested, and that's again being broken down more and more. And it's almost a forgotten phrase in some parts of our world, I mean in the literature now. The phrase native speaker no longer exists. It's become very contested. It's become in fact more and more debated over the last decade or two. And two, you know that many contemporary approaches to language learning, that social interaction is a key, but we're still not clear about all that memorization of the flashcards. We're still not really settled with that. But what we're really trying and struggling with more and more in assessment is what counts as success. How do you know your students are successful? How do you know that your materials are indeed authentic? Authentic to what? If native speakers are being destabilized, authentic to what? And these borderless classrooms are now being increasingly dreamed, and the word, of course, classroom is being destabilized. And of course, as you know, and you're more aware than I am too, the larger enrollments, the smaller budgets, they've affected us globally. And at times it seems we can't keep up. We have a lot of learner-centered approaches we have to shift to. There's a big emphasis on new media, digital devices, rapid changes, constant revisions, and indeed changing student expectations. But I know you know lots of things, and I wanted to move on, and I know that you're TESOL professionals, and I didn't want to sit here and preach to you that somehow I know anything more of the challenges. I wanted to be out with you and know that I deeply respect you. It's very difficult being a TESOL teacher and indeed an educator here in the 21st century. So in preparing for this talk, I started reading more and more about Thailand, and I am reading about Thai education system. And I recommend, if you haven't read it, or if you can't find it, or don't know about it, it's this beautiful doctorate. And I say that it's a beautifully written doctorate from Manata Chiwakorn. So it's Teaching Change in Response to Thai Tertiary English Language. Fantastic. It's really stunning. It's available online. You can download it. It's available today for you. And these results from Chiwakorn simply won't surprise you. I read the entire thesis 2 or 3 times in preparing for this talk, but quoting from the abstract, the Thai educational reform process, the many layers of interpretation tend to create ambiguity and hence resistance to change. So resistance to change is a key problem here in Thailand. An inconsistency between policy and practice caused by a range of factors, many of which we've explored today or during this conference. That lack of clear and detailed guidelines and national policy and institutional curricula, the enduring focus on grammar knowledge rather than commitment to practice, the difficulties of applying new teaching methods, our students' low competency in English, our lack of understanding of underlying theories and principles, the difficulties in identifying and responding to individual learner needs, the nature and expectation of Thai students, and that lack of consistency between what's recommended and exam-based assessment. We know these. Chiwakorn has laid it out very clearly for us in her doctorate. And you know this too from 1999, but it bears repeating sometimes. For the National Education Act in Thailand from 1999, education shall be based on the principle that all learners are capable of learning and self-development and are regarded as being the most important. The teaching learning process shall aim at enabling the learners to develop themselves at their own pace and the best of their abilities. So we've known this in Thailand for a good 17, if not more than 20 years through consultation with various educators. Chiwakorn, probably not surprising either, and we've heard this several times at this conference too. There's a long way to go in understanding appropriate and effective ways of implementing change in English language teaching here in Thailand. So what can we do about it? How can we meet some of those challenges that we've been set both by the Thai government, by our research, by our own practice, by these increasing 21st century challenges? So those challenges are still with us now here in Thailand, here in TESOL, here in the 21st century. They simply haven't gone away. What they're doing for us is increasingly making the picture of language learning, language assessment, what we should be teaching, how we should be teaching it, how we should be assessing it, what our classrooms are, what our gold standard is, are increasingly becoming destabilized. So as we enter ASEAN, and indeed begin to destabilize what a native speaker is, and all those debates about that, we've become more and more aware to the need to prioritize such concepts as community. What does it mean to be part of a community now? What does it mean to be a community of learners? What does the word language mean, and how do we start to problematize that? What is English? Who owns English? Is there a Thai English that's distinct, separate, and identifiable from, for example, Chinese English. Language teaching needs to move beyond a language as a system view. And that's the scary challenge for a lot of us. What happens when we start destabilizing language as a system? Sorry about the tight slide here. When we think about some of the dominant metaphors that have dominated in the 20th century, we used to think of language as instruction, so our emphasis was on accuracy and fluency. We moved to language as acquisition, and indeed, several people in this room have degrees in second language acquisition. We started to investigate skills and strategies as a pedagogical goal and begin to teach them. And now we've been told at this conference and other places across that language learning, the new metaphor, is indeed socialization. That performance and interaction are now our pedagogical goals. And that, if you keep thinking about it, our focus of assessment then is performance outcomes. I can do, I'm able to do. But really what we're looking for, back to our Thai national standards and our entry into ASEAN, is to join the community. So overall growth. None of us grow until Thailand as a whole grows. Overall growth in our language community. And our focal assessment now is norms and projects and artifacts. We have our students building websites. We have our students giving tours in English to foreigners, etc., etc. And our assessments now are multi-stage and multimodal, thinking they have to do a range of activities to be able to show they're actually proficient. So that's some of the metaphors we lived in the 20th century. So that instruction, acquisition, and socialization as key metaphors for what we should be doing as TESOL teachers. So what we've really abandoned is no more mechanistic metaphors. We now see communities as ecological gardens. All the metaphors that come with ecologies, the unplanned, the mutations, the unlikely, the frost, the heat, the drought. We start seeing things no more as tight machines, but as ecologies of practice, of communities. We no longer see teachers now as mechanics, able to fix up somehow the language curriculum in the service of power, for the service of the business community. We don't do that. We are not mechanics. So now we see more and more language now as translanguaging, some of the key words if I can help you. Many folks accessing different features or modes of autonomous languages to communicate to and from. So people are translanguaging, but then across languages. I talk to the Malays, I talk to the Thai, I talk to the Chinese. I translanguage in different accents. I'm critical of monolingual ideologies and words like, if I can say it out loud, teaching English as a second language no longer makes sense. It's a monolingual ideology that says, I have one language and now I need another. Those have now become very critical and very contested. Code switching, which is another word that's being destabilized, is seen as integral to success. And now increasingly we're mobilizing what they call semiotic resources as a necessity. So I walk the streets of Bangkok, I don't know Thai, and I have to mobilize multimodal actions to purchase something. I have to point, I have to gesture, I have to talk, I have to show money, I have to show and mobilize resources. Because more than a speaker, I'm a traveler, I'm a consumer. So language then is seen as an activity, not a system, and certainly not mechanistic. And increasingly, what we need is shared resources. So therefore, our goal for the 21st century is developing students who are resourceful. Students, our travelers, whether they leave their rooms or not, on the internet, they travel, and indeed, they surf, and indeed, they keep moving through space. So that new metaphor, and if I can say I borrowed Alistair Petticoat, who many of you know, is that metaphor for language as a port city. Think of language as Bangkok. It's full of international traders. And it's pragmatic accommodation of each other out of necessity. It's not regulated, it's not imagined. If I don't say the correct word, I can still give a bowl of pad thai. So Petticoat invites us to see language as a blend or a mix. Lively entities constantly in flux. And some of the new words coming up is no longer multilingualism, but metrolingualism. Think about the citizens of Thailand, of Bangkok, of Kuala Lumpur, of Singapore, and indeed of other global and international cities. They're metrolingual. They know they have resources. They get through the day. So it's not multilingualism, it's metrolingualism. So language is now a resource. And what do we do with that resource? It's a shared resource. And we can do things with it. We can enact power. But I have other semiotic resources too. I have gestures, I have cues. I have a wallet. I have other. So language is seen more and more as a resource. So then, I invite you now to think, how do you think of language in the 21st century? Do you see language as a set of colored pencils? So today we're going to talk about blue. Tomorrow it's pink. The next day we're going to talk about orange. If I do that, my metaphors are built, I then can keep all the shades and all the hues separate. And I can tell my students that we're going to build up layers of meaning. So my key metaphor is no longer socialization, but how do I see language in the classroom? Am I filling in my students' colors? How am I filling in their metaphors and their dreams? How am I coloring my syllabus? But I invite you now, with some of my students, we started to see language maybe as paint. Think about it for a moment. Those colors are no longer so easy. It becomes messy. And paint, although it can be layered, it can be mixed. But once that mix happens, that mix is forever. It's forever mixed. I am forever marked by my time in Japan. I am forever marked by my time in Africa. I am forever marked by my visit to Thailand. It's part of me now. It's part of me. I can't separate it. It's part of my semiotic resource. What I've learned here in Thailand. The next time I meet a Thai person, I'll know more about the shared resource. It's become part of me. So that paint flows across tiny borders, across tiny theories, across our tiny classrooms. That paint begins to flow. It becomes messy. We leave our fingerprints, but you see, it also has all kinds of problems in it. It's no longer so easy to do with it. I can no longer make those layers so easy to do. The handprint may be a circle. What's a circle do amongst the handprint? So language becomes that imprecise, it becomes mixed. Keeping on Petticoat's metaphors, but keeping on our own metaphor of how we get our students to make sense of the semiotic landscape as they walk across Terminal 21 shopping mall in Thailand. How do they make sense of this? So many languages, so many things are happening. So that language is subtle, it's shaded, it's beautiful, it's a semiotic resource, it's telling us things. But that language as painting makes our view of students and our curriculum really blurry. It makes things messy for us. That's really what's happening for us in the 21st century. We destabilize native speakers. We destabilize what a classroom is. We destabilize what it means to be successful in language. Things are getting messy for us in the 21st century. We destabilize those tiny theories. We destabilize quantitative approaches. We destabilize discrete entities. It's getting messy. It's becoming frustrating. It really is. some research, back to some reality, and back to Thailand. I read this beautiful article and I've used it in my own teaching. Language choice. Language choice. I want to say that as a key word, language choice. Many people in this in this room right now are metrolingual. You have choices. You see me, you have a choice how to act. And that choice happens very quickly, and you summarize it very quickly. How do you address me? You have a choice. So addressivity strategies in Thai English social network interactions. If the Thai students are like the rest of the global population, online interactions are about 17 hours a week on average. Some students spending up to 35 to 40 hours a week online. Language is online. They're making choices online across those borders without us. So, reading that research, what emerges? Language use is less about choosing to switch from one language system to another, but rather about drawing a very shared set of semiotic resources. It appears uses appropriate a range of communicative resources to establish a trans-local community. That mixed use of English and Thai act as identity markers. Who am I? I'm going to use in Thai. This morning I was greeted by a member of the Thai TESOL committee. She greeted me in Thai. She did some semiotic activity. I met up his name. She greeted me in an appropriate Thai way. And then switched to English, switched to Thai, switched to English, switched to Thai. She was welcoming me to the trans-local community that is Thai TESOL. She was welcoming to the trans-local community that indeed is Thai TESOL. And she switched, she chose, she did semiotic actions. She did it in ways. Another Thai person came up to her and she acted differently. She switched, she only speak Thai, and she bowed in a different way than she did with me. She switched beautifully, completely, appropriately, effortlessly. So, here we are. I took this photo yesterday. Jade and I were walking around, she bring me on a brief tour of Bangkok. These are what our students want to be, these emerging identities. They want a bit of Thai, but that ultimate learn and play, here we are. The Thais taking on different trans-local and national identities. Literally, you have to walk through those doors to get to that beautiful shopping mall. Literally, you have to walk through those doors. Hundreds of thousands of Thais see this every day. Advertising budget, it's like Australia, it's about 12 times the national education budget. Our students are learning this. This is the Thai identity. They have to walk through these doors. So, quick summary. So we are framed by social and ecological, not mechanistic, pedagogical models. Language then is used, is situated and distributed. It's not an individual cognitive process. Defining educational success is not as a linguistic proficiency, but as a resourceful person in a particular community. And in line with our very own national 1999 policy, section 22, focus on teacher and learner-centered design roles, not specialist plans, syllabus. We have to make sense to get our students to walk through that door of those new emerging identities, those trans-local identity markers. So where do we start? We start thinking that we, I think, have a very particular responsibility. We are agents of change. Our schools and institutions are centers of change, but we are the agents of change. Our goal is to make resourceful students who can go to Thai TESOL, who can switch and be resourceful when they see different people, different draws, different semiotic resources, to be appropriate very quickly, masterfully, beautifully, But that change is scary. There it is in black and white. I wanted us to think here at TESOL that we ourselves, individually and collectively, are resourceful engines of change. We're not here. I want to counter an earlier talk that we hear somehow in the service of the economy. We're somehow here to service these youth. We're somehow in the service of something. We're not. We're not here to do that. We're here to help our students become resourceful. We're here to be agents of change. We're here to help them walk through those doors to get to that fancy shopping mall. That fancy shopping mall is air conditioned. It has multinational goods. It has things and shops that are completely in English. Oh my goodness. I want to walk through those doors with a credit card. Can you help me? Can you get me through those doors in that shopping mall? Can you? Our goal, and my goal, and your goal in the 21st century then is to develop resourceful students. Our goal is to make students that are challenging, are travelers. Our goal, they can go to Hanoi, they can go to Singapore. I don't care if they speak perfect English, they're resourceful. They can work with the Vietnamese, they can work with the Singaporeans, they can get down to Jakarta. They're resourceful, they can draw, they can get that power plant they've forgotten. They can also walk through the doors there, the famous Jakarta shopping malls. So I gotta meet my own challenge. How do we meet these challenges? I don't want to drop you here. I was talking about my talk at lunch the other day, and somebody said, "You're not going to drop us." No, I'm going to try to help. I'm here to help. I really do want to help. I know it's challenging. I heard a talk, someone had a class of 350 students. And I sucked in my breath and I said, "Oh my goodness." So here's a few ideas. Please help me brainstorm. But I also want you to start thinking, what happens if we see languages pain? What happens if things start destabilizing? That 21st century is here, it's scary, so let's work together. First, and finally, and generally, maybe, to end that kind of thing, I recently, not to be pretentious, but I had a student, and she worked on a PhD. Here was the PhD question. Do standards matter? Does policy matter? That was the PhD question. Very provocative question. So the Thai government, 1999, says the question, do policies matter? And I look around and I say, does anyone care? No one asked me about the policy. Do your colleagues care about that policy? Well, it turns out, at the end of that PhD, what matters is the disjunction between the policy and the classroom teachers. They don't really understand it. We saw that in Ji-Won Kord's PhD thesis. Our role then as Thai professionals, Thai TESOL professionals, that we are resourceful and we can help foster greater understanding of policy. Because that policy is going to help us. That policy, knowing policy increases our semiotic resource. The next time a diplomat comes to our conference, we can say, oh yes, we're helping to meet that policy. We don't say, no, I don't know that policy. No, I don't understand that policy. No, Mr. Diplomat, we're helping to meet that policy. We understand that policy. We here at TESOL are resourceful, proactive. We're helping to meet those policies. Gently, we're meeting those policies. I, like you, have helped run departmental and complicated processes. I, like you, have suffered, I'm not that different than you, I've suffered the same issues, the same unclear. Perhaps unlike you, I fired one of my colleagues for fostering dependencies. She was too nice to the students. She helped the students on Saturdays. She helped the students get apartments. She helped the students buy stuff. And I said, please leave. And people were shocked when I said, no. You're fostering a dependency. Please, no. Not in my project, not in my part of my department. You can't do that. Because one day you're going to go and that student's going to ask where you are, and I'm going to say, she had a part-time job. Sorry. It's me. You can't foster dependency. So let's agree we don't foster dependencies. We I'm not the native speaker who somehow is the nice guy who's going to help you in that scary world. I'm not your guide. I'm here to help you be resourceful. Okay? I'm not the nice guy who's going to say, hey, let me give you the hot tip. Those other guys are scary, but I'm a nice guy. No. No deal. So that management, the other thing we need to do, and Chiwa Korn's PhD reinforces this, that management, often hierarchical, and I know some of you in this room are in fact in management, we in management have to be interactive and team-based. We have to reach out to those part-time staff. We have to get their voices. We have to reduce power distance. It's challenging. We're resourceful. I know there's cultural constraints. I know it. We've got to reach out on both sides. We're resourceful, our students are resourceful. We've got to keep reminding ourselves in our own departments. And I recommend what I did with my students. We decided to be standards compliant. I'll tell you why. Thai TESOL is part of that TESOL family, so are all the PAC members that we're lucky to have us here at this conference. We're part of a big organization called TESOL. And TESOL has this thing called TESOL Technology Standards. They've been up there on the web for a good 10 years. Here's the deal. 3 years, 2 years, 5 years, I went to market my university, my colleagues, as saying, we are a standards compliant university. Please come to our university, not the other 162 universities that are here in Thailand. Our university is standards compliant. Goal. There's our goal. We're going to do this in 3 to 5 years. We're going to work together. We're resourceful. We are going to be standards compliant. We are TESOL professionals. We're going to acquire and maintain knowledge. We're going to integrate our knowledge. We're going to apply our technology and record keeping, feedback, and assessment. We're going to do this in 3 to 5 years. We're going to take our time. We are going to be standards compliant. To do this, I'm going to ask, and this is a true story, the marketing department to help pay for it. All of my hiring decisions are now going to say, are you standards compliant? We only hire people that meet these standards. I'm like you. I have a complicated department. People are busy. This is what I started doing, small teams. 3 to 5, sometimes even 2 or 3 of us. Modest goals. We look at each other, me, 2 colleagues, and I say, hey, let's do something together. A bit of a technique, a small action research project. Here's our goal. We're going to be at Thai TESOL 2016. We're going to work together, the 3 of us. Deal? Let's do this thing. 350 students in my class. I got oral presentations. Overwhelming. This is a true story. Same problem you had. I said, okay, I just went to a conference. I went to Thai TESOL. I'll tell you what, you guys are going to run a conference. 16 weeks from now, in a semester, you guys are going to have a conference. Yes, the whole thing. They're going to present. They're going to get sponsors. They're going to decide who they want to invite. They're going to be resourceful.